Hey, I'm Brian Van, SportBikeTrackHere.com. Today we're going to break down the Graves steering damper mount, Öhlins universal steering damper install on our 2022 STG Yamaha R7 project bike. What is a steering damper and why do I need it? Well, if you're going to take your motorcycle to the racetrack, and specifically if you're going to modify the suspension like we have on our R7, we've now installed K-Tech pressurized front fork cartridges. We'll talk about that in another video. A K-Tech DDS rear shock. Messing with the geometry, we're putting on some sticky Michelin Power Slick 2 slick tires. You introduce the possibility, right, for instability. It's certainly not going to be as stable as it was in its stock form, because this bike from the factory was designed to be really easy to ride, confidence inspiring, okay? So you put the steering damper on. What it does is provides resistant, adjustable, so that tire, it's so sticky, it's sticking on the lift. Adjustable resistance for the steering sweep. Okay, and that way if the bike starts to want to shake, it becomes a little unstable, that just slows it down and controls it. You're able, based on the amount of stability or the imperfections in the racetrack that you're on, dial in the amount that is best suited for you. This is a mod that's not for everyone. If you're riding on the street, probably not a road you need to go down. If you want to see what it takes to get it installed, stay tuned. We're going to show you from start to finish. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right into this steering damper install. We've got our Öhlins universal damper with our Graves damper mount kit. So on our R7, in order to facilitate this, we are going to have to remove one of the fork legs. You have to slide the clamp over in order to attach it to the fork, the steering damper that is. Of course, we already have this all safety wired, ready to go. We are almost ready for our maiden voyage this upcoming weekend with our friends at Sportbike Track Time. Barber Motorsports Park, one of my favorite tracks. Go over to the other side. Go ahead and grab these fender bolts real quick. Got our K-Tech suspension all buttoned up on this. Pressurized front cartridges, DDS rear shock. Michelin Power Slick 2 tires mounted up. Back over to the other side. We're using the Woodcraft axle sliders on this bike to protect the fork bottoms. One nice thing with those is you're able to actually use the adapter that mounts the one on the left side. Able to use that as an axle tool, which is a nice added little benefit there. A couple of fender bolts. Fender can come off now. You're going to have to support the bike underneath the triple clamp. Got our pit bowl stand here, along with our R7 specific pin. Go ahead and slide the calipers off, like so. Some people do have concern for letting them hang like that on the brake lines. It's important to note the brake lines that we're using, those Spiegler brake lines, they literally have a picture on their website of a motorcycle hanging from a brake line off the forks of a forklift. So I would say it's going to support those calipers, no problem. All right. Break our clip-on cuff loose. Grab a 6 mil. Pull that clip-on cuff off. Install this on your left fork tube, like so. Need to reset our ride height. When we come back, we'll be doing that. Okay, let's go ahead and let's get that ride height set up front. I just kind of like to make sure the forks are even. The top cap's really irritating when they're not. For right now, right, we have these at the stock height, which is 5 mil. Don't really pay much attention to that because that is not ultimately going to end up being the setup that we're going to be running. That's just where they're at right now. Okay, those are just finger tight. Start by torquing the lower. The number I found here was only 8 foot-pounds. The number I found for the top clamp was 19. The lower one seemed a little lower than I expected. I'm going to do a little additional research before we do the first ride. Probably should break down and just buy a service manual. Instead of being a cheapo and just trying to Google it. Okay, I've got some visual alignment marks. That I've been using for the clip-ons. Just kind of get it back there. This will end up being measured. Get a nice tool to do that. That'll be one of the final things we do before we throw it in the trailer. Okay, next up, we need to mount the bracket that goes up against the fairing stay. We're still using the OEM fairing stay. While we're here, we can go ahead and slide the fastener into our fork tube mount. We've been using these gray steering damper mounts on most of our bikes now. They do a great job with these. Going to remove this lower bolt. Here is the bracket from Graves. You can see how that slides right in here. It's also going to act as a steering stop, which is kind of cool. Turn that just a little bit so it'll drop in. Lines up nicely. Now we're going from a 12 millimeter hex to a 6 mil internal hex. If you want to use a torque wrench there, go ahead and do a little research. Find your torque spec for that fairing mount. I don't really feel the need to do that. Next up is our universal Öhlins steering damper. Comes with a clamp, not yet installed. You want to slide it over like we're showing you here. The torque of these fasteners is really important. You want to make sure that you do not over tighten these. I think the spec is somewhere around just over 4 foot-pounds, so it's very little. If you clamp this down too hard, you could in fact end up doing some damage to the body of the damper itself. You know, moral of the story there is just no need to be rowdy. Okay, so you can see right now this little shield that I, for whatever reason, decided to leave on the bike is going to be in the way. I'm going to have to grab a couple of things so I can remove that now. Okay, so like any other install, right, you know, we did run into a couple of complications here. We're going to lay those out for you, and hopefully that helps you get your job done right the first time and faster. So the bracket here, this slides over the OEM steering stop on the steering head, and it also bolts to the lower fairing stay mount. Fairing stays, there's different styles out there. We're running the OEM steel fairing stay still. When we're building this bike right now, this current version is going to be what we would envision our customers would build, right? A good track day bike, a good club racing bike. You know, we're not building this to go Moto America racing, not at this point. The different models of fairing stay, right, are going to, you know, kind of dictate thickness on the ears. The steel can be thinner because it's much stronger, also a little heavier. The aluminum will be a little thicker in that area. So what I found is when you put this bracket up there, right, it kind of tilts. When you put it up against the fairing stay, it tilts like this. I'm exaggerating, but that is the angle. So what I found is if you're going to use the OEM stay, you need about a 3mm spacer on the back side. You can still use the same hardware. There's plenty of penetration. I'm going to put just a little bit of blue thread locker. You know, this is clearly a joint that's stressed, right? A connection point that's got stress. 6mm internal hex. And go ahead and get this torqued. If you'd prefer to use a torque wrench, by all means, look up the torque spec, and you can go that route. That looks good. Next up is going to be the steering damper itself, okay? You're going to have to slide this clamp over the body of the damper. I'm going to set it up so that we're about in the middle here. This may need to be adjusted. And once we set the sweep on the damper, we can mess around with that. There is a specification in the Öhlins manual. If you prefer to use a torque wrench, you can use an inch-pounds wrench. If you have one that's accurate enough, like a foot-pound wrench that goes down to like 4, you could use that there. Okay, now the hardware to mount the damper. Definitely going to use just a little bit of blue here. And how I'm going to run this is I'm going to route it like this, and we're going to show you how we did this with our brake lines. There was a little deflector that we still had in place underneath the steering stem. That has now been shit canned. That's off the bike. No big deal. Don't really need that. That's more of an OEM thing. Go ahead and get that started. Let's get these run down. We can put some torque on these. You know, it's funny, sometimes the install, you're like, oh, this is going to be fast and easy. These are always a piece of cake. You know, those are the ones that, you know, it takes a little bit of patience, maybe a little creativity to get the end result that you want. That is a T40. This is hardware that was supplied with the Graves mount kit. I'm going to put final torque on these right now. Okay. Now for the sweep of the damper, this is obviously very important. To put this plastic shield up, because this is remaining on this bike. With the bodywork that we're using, it needs to stay in place. We installed both armor bodies as well as hot bodies. Right now, the stuff that we have painted up is the armor body, so that's what we're going to be running. Both kits fit well. With the armor bodies kit, you need these plastic pieces. With the hot bodies kit, these will be removed. You'll have to come up with a little bracket to relocate. Voltage regulator, which I don't think would be a really big deal. Okay, now let's go ahead and check the sweep of the damper. We're stopping in a new place now because there's a steering stop incorporated with the Graves damper mount. And how we're going to set it, we're going to set it over on this side at the fork clamp. Go ahead and turn it all the way to the right. Hold it against the steering stop, and I'm going to pull this clamp out so we have a couple millimeters. What you don't want is you don't want that damper just bottoming out, right? We got a couple millimeters like so. Clamp is tight enough that when I rotate it, it's not going to pull it loose and change the position. So we'll get back up in here. Do not go bananas on this. You have a lot of clamping force. There's no reason to crush that fork tube. Go ahead and check it. Good. Not hitting the regulator. Now, very important, right? Let's look in here at the changes we made. We pulled this deflector out underneath here. We're still using, with our Spiegler non-ABS Rennsport brake lines, we're still using the OEM horn bracket as a mount. That helps to secure the brake line over the steering damper on the left side of the bike. We have no conflict or interaction in any way, shape, or form, right? I gotta tell you, this install took a little more time than I expected, right? But the end result that we got is one that I'm happy with. If you're riding this motorcycle on a racetrack, this is without a doubt a must-have. You have to have a steering damper on this bike to manage any possible head shake. That could turn into a tank slapper, and that could turn into a crash. Nobody wants that. This is a must-have. What do I think of the kit? I think the kit Just like all the other Graves kits, it fit well. This one took a little more fiddling to kind of get everything to work with the OEM fairing stay, which normally I'd be running an aluminum fairing stay. We're just not at this point. You know, and then the brake line configuration that we have here, I also had to do some, you know, rerouting to get it to work out without any conflicts. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to set yourself up where you have things that are rubbing against each other, where you could end up rubbing through a brake line or you could cause any kind of binding. It's really important that you take your time with anything that's related to your controls and make sure that it is literally perfect. If you have any questions, leave those in the comments section of this video. I answer all that stuff myself, and I'm here to make sure you get the same result from your project we do ours.